Hi, I'm Monica Olson.
And I'm Jennifer Walsh.
And you're listening to the Biophilic Solutions Podcast, where every other week we sit down with experts and thought leaders in order to explore the innate connection between humans and nature and why we need nature to thrive.
We truly believe that reconnecting with the natural world and understanding our place within nature is a key to tackling the global environmental problems we face today.
So let's get to today's episode.
Hey, Monica.
Hey, Jennifer.
Okay, I have a seemingly random question for you, but I promise it's not actually that random. Have you ever played Pokemon Go?
You know, I have a little bit with my kids when they were younger, but I'm not sure I'm their target demographic. Now, I do remember when it was really popular a few years ago that people were celebrating the fact that it was getting so many people outside and moving them around.
That's exactly it. So you're absolutely right. And there's actually a ton of research on Pokemon Go's mental health benefits, which is really fascinating to me. I think Pokemon Go really speaks to this desire we have to get and discover something new outdoors. If we know we're going to find something exciting when we hop off a couch and head into the trail, I mean, I'd be excited to do it, wouldn't you?
Definitely. So, I'm starting to see where you're going with this, Jen. Besides asking Pokemon Go to maybe be a sponsor, this segues nicely into our interview today with Emily and Gregory Han. They're the husband and wife duo who co-authored Mushroom Hunting, Forage for Fungi and Connect with the Earth, which is part of the Pocket Nature series. So this book is all about magical therapeutic practice of learning to identify and discover all different kinds of mushrooms. So I kind of see your Pokemon Go point.
Okay, good. And crucially, it's not necessarily about harvesting or consuming mushrooms. It's about seeking out something interesting and the sense of wonder and accomplishment when you find it.
Exactly like Pokemon Go, or at least according to my kids.
Well, my point exactly.
So in this interview, we chat with Emily and Gregory about mushroom hunting as an exciting and joyful mindfulness practice. So think about that, mindfulness for mushroom hunting. And we'll also talk about why mushrooms aren't really quite plants and they aren't quite animals. The entire living network is underneath our feet. It's very mysterious, but we're here to share it with you.
So yes, let's get to our interview with Emily and Gregory Han.
Is it happening? Are we recording?
We were waiting for you.
Emily, Gregory, so good to see both of you guys. Welcome back into our lives. How have you been?
Busy. Yeah. We've been busy and very happy. We moved to somewhere where mushrooms are abound. So
where are you guys? Because were you in Glendale? You were outside of Los Angeles?
No, we were in Mount Washington, which is a hillside community in Los Angeles. But now we are abutted against the Angeles National Forest in a neighborhood called Altadena, Pasadena.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I'm so happy about this conversation with the two of you because it's been since the Biophilic Leadership Summit that we've all been together, I believe, all at the same time. So I loved meeting you then, and I'm so excited to get into your work here. And I've always loved following the both of you on social because all of your, beautiful, poetic work around nature. So I can't wait to get into the subject of mushrooms.
Thanks so much for having us.
And since we booked you guys originally, I know we have had so many changes. You actually got, I think, another book contract. So we'll have to talk about that as well. But why don't we just jump in and give us a little bit of your background, because you've co-authored this book together, Mushroom Hunting, but you've also done other publications. You've also done other books prior to this. So start with your background and how did we get to where we are today?
You are right. We come from different backgrounds professionally. I'm a design journalist, so I write a lot about architecture, automotive design, product design, environmental architecture, landscape architecture. It's a lot of things all at once, which is happening right now. But both Emily and I always had this passion about mushrooms and the natural world that we always wanted to work on something together, but we didn't think it would be a book.
I work mostly as a naturalist, an herbalist, writer, and educator, kind of integrating ecology, mindfulness, food and drink, herbal plant medicine. I primarily teach classes that basically help people cultivate that sensory awareness and connection with the natural world through mostly cooking, gardening, plant medicine. Yeah, so I've kind of, been immersed in this world, but like Gregory said, we've always had this shared passion for the natural world. And so getting to work on that together, to really bring that out has been really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, the books are great. Like, so the past books prior to the mushroom have been very design focused. You did an amazing one, Gregory, with, is it Poquito? Is that my saying right? Which is such a cool, amazing group. Yeah, really cool. And then Emily, the drinks books, Wild Drinks and Cocktails, and then Remedies. I just think it's sort of fun how you kind of come together. And then this book is sort of a smaller format size. It's very designy. It's like the perfect stocking stuffer or gift, and really throw it in your pocket, which we'll talk about while you're mushroom hunting or you're foraging.
I remember when we were told about the format, we got excited because we knew that we weren't ready to do like a big book like about mushrooms, because mycology is a field that you can dive deeply. And I think our relationship with mushrooms is much more on a personal scale, not academic, but we had a deep passion. And our friend who had written another book in that series was the reason why we got introduced to our publisher. And he had done one. Shout out to Casey Schreiner, who did cloud spotting, and he recommended us. And then
nice.
Yeah, it just happened to work out. The scheduling was perfect too.
I love it. Well, and mushrooms are fascinating. So give us a few tidbits. I mean, I know when the thing that surprised me the most, and maybe I sort of knew this in the back of my head, but a mushroom is not a plant and it's not an animal. And so it's closer to humans than a plant. And so talk a little bit about that. I mean, that's sort of fascinating.
Yeah. Like what is
and
a
I don't
mushroom?
know if people know that. Yeah. So what's a mushroom?
Well, a mushroom, so like you said, it's not an animal, it's not a plant, it's a fungus. The mushrooms that we tend to think about, that we're all kind of familiar with, that you find in the grocery store or Super Mario Brothers, all that mushroom is really, it's just part of the whole fungus and the whole larger life cycle of a fungus. You kind of think of a fungus, maybe think of it like a tree or something. The mushroom is just the fruit of that fungus. The reproductive structure of it, maybe kind of like an apple or something. But unlike an apple tree where you're going to see the trees, branches, and the roots, the fungus main body is usually hidden. Usually it's underground within the soil or maybe within wood. And then that fungus is made up of like really microscopic little filaments called hyphae. And then those are bundled into mass called mycelium. So there's this, whole life and world of mushrooms that we actually don't normally see. But then when they fruit and then we see these wondrous, amazing shapes, that's what we tend to see.
Can I back up for like 1 second? Because I'm curious, how did you even fall in love with mushrooms? Like, what was it that sparked this interest for the both of you to say, yeah, we have to write this book. It's so much fun. Or like, what was that spark to be like, okay, this is cool. We have to write a book about it.
It was interesting because we were avid hikers prior to becoming mycophiles. I think it was when Emily moved to Southern California, I wanted to show her the Los Angeles that I loved, the California that I loved, because she's originally from Texas. And I started taking her to all these trails that I grew up hiking, and I wanted her to feel at home outside of the hubbub of the city. And so we were hiking regularly at that point. And I think we ran into mushrooms here and there, but Southern California it's a Mediterranean climate and can be very arid. And Southern California's mushroom landscape is much more limited than Northern California, which is like shooting fish in a barrel. But it was one season, one early, was it August? It poured nonstop. And it was like fireworks, terrestrial fireworks. And we just started seeing mushrooms everywhere in shapes and colors and sizes we had never seen before. And then it's kind of like Pokemon. You want to capture them all. You really do want to like find more. And so we started looking at places that I think we overlooked in the landscape on the trail, and we started going even more. I think we were hiking every other day, it seemed like.
Wow.
Looking for mushrooms. So
I think there's an intentional awareness around that too, that the both of you had this beautiful awareness of you're like, what am I seeing? What is this? And then that kind of, I think that's the beauty of nature as well. It kind of shows this, I need to know more. I'm curious about this thing I don't know more about. So there's really something cool about that.
yeah.
Well, and I like the comparison of like Pokemon trying to find all the different mushrooms. And maybe you're not even doing it for consumption. You're doing it more out of, I think you had mentioned, like, mindfulness and sort of a curiosity and a little bit of a game, which is sort of fun. But I like that as an idea to go out. That totally makes sense about Southern California. And I hadn't really thought about Northern California. Being in Georgia, we have a lot of humidity and the temperature fluctuates. And so we get incredible mushrooms in the woods here. But that's interesting, that not only is it going to be seasonal, but it's going to be regional. Are there places in the US that are, or climates, maybe like mountaintops, like where would you go find it wherever you are across the United States? What should people be looking for to try and find mushrooms?
Yeah, I think it's just one of the wonderful things about becoming interested in mushrooms. And, it wasn't just the mushrooms themselves, but it was like, okay, how are we going to find them? Where are they growing? Why are they growing in certain places? So it just grew our awareness so much of different ecosystems and just things like humidity, rainfall, temperature, different, little microclimates where mushrooms might grow. So even if they might not be, all over your backyard, there might be like a little corner of the backyard that actually tends to stay very, a little cooler and more moist. And you're like, oh, that is a place a mushroom might like to live. So within the United States, definitely areas that get more rainfall. Pacific Northwest is kind of a mushroom, heaven. When we go there, there's so many, but it is incredible how I think once you really start paying attention that you can find mushrooms all over the place, like somewhere very dry, like Southern California, or, or I'll go home to Texas where it can, be very humid and moist, but then there's other times when I wouldn't necessarily expect to see any, but you just pay attention and you start to see.
And last year was it last year we went out to the desert?
Oh, yeah.
Because going back to the Pokemon analogy, on my list was I wanted to find desert mushrooms, which are very ephemeral. They come monsoon season, drop the water, or winter storms and drop enough water. Those mushrooms have to grow really fast. They fruit, they disappear within a couple days, like 1 or 2 days.
Wow.
So we had recently gone out to, I think, look also at some wildflowers and ephemeral pools out there and found by chance a shaggy mane that had popped out. I think we both screamed in joy. It was just like, we were hugging and dancing.
That's so fun.
I know. You're like definite. Love that. Like mushroom nerd. Love to find the mushrooms.
We embrace that. Yeah.
Oh,
Awesome.
100%. I think it's super cool.
Yeah.
I also like how you flipped, because I hadn't really thought about it. We've been hearing so much about mushrooms and the mycelium and how this sort of network of roots and trees and everything that's happening underneath our feet. So I feel like there's been some awareness over the years from different books and research, but I really like the way that you explained it, Emily, that, an apple tree, the branches are above ground and you're seeing the fruit. But with the mushroom is the fruit, or what we think of as the mushroom fruit. But there's a whole branches, if you will, underground we just don't see. So I really like that flip to rethink about it.
Yeah, there's just so much going on. And I think looking for mushrooms kind of awakens, see the fruits that you can see, but also just that sense of wonder and awe of what's going on that we don't see that's interacting underground, the soil microbes, the fungus and plant roots and, all of that.
So there are so many different variations of mushrooms, but how did you choose the 15 that you're showcasing and focusing on in the book? And do you have favorites, like favorite kinds of mushrooms? Like I have so many questions for you guys. So I'm going to try and pace myself with this because I'm just fascinated.
That was quite a process that we had to narrow it down. Because this is a general guide, it's not a specific geographic guide. We had to figure out what are the most common mushrooms found on every continent. That was tough because we wanted to include so many weird and wonderful ones that are a little more rare, but it's kind of a little bit of like a gateway. We wanted to make sure people that feel like this is approachable and these are the ones that you would commonly find or want to interact with. There was a level of interactivity that we wanted with mushrooms because people are really afraid. Americans are mycophobic. We always think we're going to get poisoned or death associated with it. I always tell people learn these few mushrooms. They can kill you. They can if you ingest them, but most of them won't have an effect worse than a tummy ache. In reality, you should not be eating anything you don't know.
Yeah.
we don't forage.
Yeah, I mean, we rarely actually forage any mushrooms for eating. And it's, but like you said, there's such a phobia, even like being near a mushroom or touching a mushroom or, are you going to inhale spores, around the air and everything. So I think making it approachable and, something that people can experience and not be afraid of.
And like, to go back to your question of like, how do we pick favorite, or if we have favorites, we definitely have favorites. It's funny. We have this different perspective. I'm always like looking for these big mushrooms, and she finds these tiny little like pinpricks of fungus. And it's amazing because they're both worth investigating, So like for me, I remember where I became obsessed was when that same season, that first rainy season that I can remember, the Santa Monica Mountains blowing up with mushrooms. It was California golden chanterelles, which I didn't know chanterelles grew in Southern California. They're so much bigger than the Northern California versions and Pacific Northwest ones. They get about this big. They're called mud puppies because after all the rain, they look like a giant egg yolk had been left out, a golden egg yolk had been out, and you can see them against the mud.
Wow.
And that was memorable. And then here, when we moved here to this new home, down the trail, a lion's mane started growing. And so we visited it every day as it was growing and growing because we both wanted it.
So cool.
We both wanted to eat something. We don't forage very much, but there are certain things like lion's mane where you're like, okay, yeah, we would like to eat that one.
Right. You very clearly recognize it. You know what it is. You can identify it.
But why lion's mane? What is it about that you love about the lion's mane?
Lion's mane tastes like lobster when you cook it. It's so delicious. The texture has the same. Emily strangely you don't like eating mushrooms.
I'm not a huge fan of eating mushrooms, but that is one that I really enjoy.
Fascinating.
And just the form, if you haven't seen it, just think of a lion's mane. It looks like hair or teeth or kind of, I think that was the other reason we came up with these 15 different categories of mushrooms, was just kind of based on the different shapes and forms of mushrooms you might see, because there's that stereotypical mushroom shape.
The
cap and the stem and the gills, but there's like the lion's mane is like so wild. Different, and there's so many just amazing different shapes of mushrooms. That's kind of how we came up with those main categories.
That reminds me, there was a mushroom when we moved here, and we were walking on the trail, and it was a pretty warm day, and I was like, "Is that bear poop?" And we just kind of, because we live in an area where there are bears. And so it was a big clump of brown. And I was like, that looks kind of like bear poop. And we took a stick and it poured. And we realized it was a puffball type of mushroom that grows around our mountains that we had never run into because it was just not growing around our area previously. Wow. But mushrooms can just surprise you in all the different morphologies that it expresses itself.
Well, there's so many, right? So that's the other thing that I learned. Like there's hundreds of thousands of species that we haven't even identified all of them. There may be many, many, many more globally. So is the next book going to be like quirkier ones, or is it going to be like a level 2? Like what's the story there?
We have just submitted our draft.
Just submitted the manuscript.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But we could say it is in the same series.
It's the Pocket Nature series from Chronicle.
Okay.
Got it. So the whole series, there's ours, Mushroom Hunting, and then there are other books, like our friend Casey Schreiner wrote one on cloud spotting. There are ones about leaf peeping and stargazing. So there are all kind of these different facets of connecting with nature.
We could reveal that the next topic is adjacent to what we had written about.
That's
mushroom
great.
adjacent.
Okay.
Mushroom adjacent.
Mushroom adjacent. I like it.
I love it.
A fungi friend.
Yes.
So true.
So that's really funny that you don't love to eat mushrooms, Emily, at all. Do you use them in any kind of medicinal? Do you dry them, or have you?
I do.
You're not cooking with them. Like, what do you?
And there are some, certain mushrooms that I do enjoy eating. Shiitakes. Last night we had wood eater mushroom salad for dinner. So I'm not, averse to all mushrooms. But it's not the first thing I think of actually in mushrooms is eating it. It's just
and she's a vegetarian, so that subtracts a lot of.
That's true. And well, I'm actually allergic to your common button mushrooms and portobellos, and so that But anyway, medicinally, yes, there are some reishi mushrooms, turkey tails, other mushrooms that you can make strong teas with, use them in that form, or in broths, in capsules. There's different of medicinal mushrooms too.
Yeah, and mushrooms being used in that way is always a little bit of a concern because, like, at the beginning we did like forage mushrooms, and we kind of shared, that excitement of finding something wild that you can. But we realized, like, to responsibly forage is very hard to teach without an understanding of the landscape and the place. I think coming out of the pandemic, there was a lot of people who were going to a place to escape and taking as much as they could out of that experience, including things from it. And so, Emily, I think she used to teach foraging classes. You started feeling uncomfortable about.
I pretty much, stopped teaching those one-off foraging classes just because, you, as much as you might want to teach a sense of responsibility and reciprocity, I mean, it can be hard for someone to, develop that in an hour or something,
Sure.
or really, come in with that mindset. So now, when I teach it tends to be of a longer term process where it's really the first thing you're learning is developing the relationship, with the world around you, with the earth. And so that is guiding, that sense of relationship and reciprocity is really what's, guiding you rather than what can I take, what can I harvest, and that can be part of it, eventually. But
that's a great point.
Well, I did really like that it's like, it doesn't have to be about consumption. Jen and I were having an offline conversation earlier about consumption and, just how we all need to become more socially conscious and really reconsider how we're consuming. And that could even be foraging. So I like that. I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. Back to what you guys say about think of foraging as a practice rather than a extraction. And I like the seeking and finding, but don't take, just note. It's almost like bird watching a little bit. Right?
Yeah.
Where you're not, God forbid, you're not taking the bird home. You're just, marking down that you saw whatever you saw. And that's the excitement there. And I also like if you guys could dig in a little bit more, becoming, Jen on her walks, it's huge. Like, how do you become fluent with the land and how do you really think about it? Have you, in your foraging, non-foraging classes, like thought about more of that, like taking people on almost like hikes and tours rather than, and you might point stuff out, but it's like, we're not going to extract it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's that, that sense of slowing down too, because part of that taking is just rushing through an area, not really paying attention to what's going on there over time too. And, really being able to like observe and interact, first. And I think just being present to those small things that you observe, for me, it's like the mushrooms can be a way in, but once you're really spending time with like crouching down, squatting down in the ground, like, or maybe there's a mushroom up ahead and really spending that time with the mushroom, you start learning about the mushroom themselves, but also, what's going on in the land around them, the trees that they're growing near, what are the cycles that are happening there, who are the, other little creatures, that you're meeting there, the little and beetles and, everyone else that also, really has a relationship or interconnection with the mushrooms and with that ecology. So yeah, I think that's really exciting. One thing that we really enjoyed finding near where we lived was there's these beetles called diabolical ironclad beetles.
Wow.
What a name.
Heavy metal beetles.
They cannot be crushed. That's how they got their name. They're ironclad. But many times now we've observed these beetles eating split gill mushrooms. And that's just such an exciting, we didn't know about that and never seen that before, but now we've returned to the same place again and again. And we see that they have this ongoing relationship. And so that just gives us, I think, a deeper sense of appreciation for mushrooms.
And if you haven't seen a split gill mushroom, they are pretty beautiful. They're fuzzy on the top, like a off-white fuzzy, almost like fluffed up cotton.
Mm-hmm.
And then underneath is the gills that are very symmetrically beautiful, like almost
beautiful.
like, I don't know how would you describe how those skills, almost like they had been illustrated rather than grown. But then you have these very badass looking beetles. They look like they can endure anything, because you can run over these beetles and they'll just walk away. That's how
No way.
That's how strong their carapace is.
Wow.
But then they'll be delicately eating these mushrooms and quietly.
Fascinating.
And we'd pass by this section of trail over and over and see them come out over and over again. And mushrooms make hiking the trail much more interesting because you start having waypoints. Like you remember, hey, this is where these beetles always come out. Oh, this is where those oyster mushrooms come out every autumn. So you stop rather than just having a destination, because you start recognizing mushrooms are an expression of the landscape. And so that landscape can be where water is, or where there's a cool shaded area, or a giant rock that is giving just enough protection up here. So it's fascinating that mushrooms changed the way that we had hiked. It became from a destination to the whole experience.
I'm sure you must feel this way, that your book and this discovery and this awareness and this excitement for what's new to us, it must be even so new to other people that might fear the outdoors or fear beetles or fear mushrooms. Like, this must be an exciting opportunity for you to kind of give that education a little kick to so many other people. Like, look at how beautiful mushrooms can be, and beetles at the same time. And they're not scary. Don't be afraid of them. But how cool,
with their
right?
diabolical name.
Yeah.
Well, I know. It's like the cool factor of like, wow, I get to introduce people to cool things.
If we think back, I don't want to date ourselves, but the decades that when we started having this interest in mushrooms, our friends really thought we were really out there. They were just so curious why we were so interested in it.
Especially when we say it wasn't really to eat them too, because that people could kind of understand. That makes sense. But why are you looking for these?
Yeah, our Flickr page at that time, or our live journal. I mean, early social media, were sharing these photos, and we didn't get really that much response amongst our peers, but we didn't care. We were both into it, and that was enough. And so over time, seeing this cultural shift of awareness. And I think it was born out of the time of being stuck at home. A lot of people were being local and seeking outdoors as a way to escape being stuck. That people started slowing down. We were allowed to slow down, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, we're not allowed to slow down. And that curiosity that we're speaking of only comes when you have the opportunity to, the notifications aren't coming. I don't have to answer to a deadline. And that was a privilege that we had in our youth. Both of us were probably underemployed at that time. We could go hiking, and
sure,
it doesn't cost anything to get out there.
No.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. And I think, it doesn't take a ton of skills to be a mushroom hunter. I mean, you need to be able to get out, find somewhere, natural. But to your point, it could be your backyard. It could be a local park. There's different places that you can go find it. And I think that's the biggest thing that we're always trying to push people is it doesn't have to be a trip to Yosemite. There are these incredible places in your backyard, if you will, that we can go find incredible things. And I just love, because again, our brains, right, are so moving fast with the screens and the digital and all the technology, to get out and just sort of quiet your mind. I'm just searching for the ruffled split, whatever, it's just a fun, okay, I'm going to go find that thing because I want to look underneath it and see the beauty of that in person.
Yeah. And you're not guaranteed to find them every time, especially being down where we are. I think there have been days when we've gone out looking for them and been disappointed in the sense that we didn't find them, but we always find something else.
I mean, it's still a wonderful day. Spend time outside, and and I think so much of, like you were saying, it doesn't take a lot of skill or equipment, or you're just really just relying on your own senses. You're feeling the humidity on your skin. You're noticing how the sunlight falls, smelling the soil, seeing the colors, or hearing the birds, and all of that. So whether or not you actually end up finding mushrooms, I think you had a really enriching experience in that process.
And like maybe even like more of this heightened awareness of your surroundings, because you, like what you just said, Emily, is like you're very in tune to like the moisture, like, is it going to rain, or can I smell possibly a rainstorm coming? Or, your very, very heightened awareness really is like that superpower, I like to say. So
I would say
yeah.
50% of the time of finding mushrooms, I would smell them before.
Yeah, you're really good at that.
Wow. That's so interesting.
Smell of certain mushrooms, but
yeah,
you become aware, to your point, like your skin is your biggest organ and you can feel the temperature change. And when you start becoming acquainted with where mushrooms like to generally grow from, you can feel it in your skin too. You can be like, oh, I feel this coolness. I feel a little bit of a breeze. It's not, stale coolness. And mushrooms are like people. They have preferences where they want to pop up.
Right,
so cool.
right. And they're all different, right? So what were some of the most surprising things that you guys learned as you dug into and did the book?
I think that statistic of like how many mushrooms are yet to be identified, I knew there was a lot, but I didn't know there was still that many. And both of us follow a lot of figures in mycology and to see, I think this week there was somebody in China had just found a new species, and Rockefeller's always identifying. Mm-hmm. So there's
just so many out there, and because they are, I think, have been so overlooked, I think, by a lot of people. Yeah, that there are still so many more for us to stop and notice.
And then I think with the climate change making everything kind of Russian roulette of like seasons, in doing the research, we were returning to places where we had seen mushrooms and not finding them, but then finding them elsewhere that were previously there weren't. And so mushrooms are, in that sense, like a canary in the coal mine of like the ecosystem. So knowing where the environment has changed significantly in good and bad ways, you can see that when you return to a place over and over again. Mushrooms are really great at not making you a one and done visitor of a place. You want to go back to revisit.
Right. Because we know there's an apple tree, and that's the apple tree that grows every year, and that's in whatever the corner of this backyard or this park. But the mushroom may or may not, and obviously the apple may have different taste over the years, more abundant, riper, but it is interesting to think that like that ephemeral nature, like you were saying, is a really interesting, and that, probably lends to the discovery, right? That it's this mystery as you're going out on the hike. Will it or won't it be there? And it depends. To your point, Southern California can be so dry, but then there's been so much rain, strangely, in past seasons. And so who knows what'll happen this fall.
And teaches you to slow down too. Like, what's the best way to slow down? Do your mushroom hunting. It will definitely teach you to slow down.
Is one step forward, 2 steps back. Yeah.
That's perfect.
Two steps and then sit down and spend, 45 minutes.
Staring at the ground.
Yeah.
You said multiple times, like, this could be the whole hike and I'll be happy.
Yeah.
I love that.
You don't have to go far. There's so many. Just
I absolutely love it. Any concerns that you have with mushrooms? I know we talked a little bit about the foraging. Like, is it a sustainable, I guess it's a fungi, right? So it's like not a plant, but is it something that you feel good about how they're grown? Like, can we continue to grow and help demand?
I think, they're different mushrooms. There's some that can be easily cultivated, and those ones, it's not, such an issue. But then there are ones that really only grow in certain places or, relationships with certain trees. And, so those ones, there may not be enough to meet the demand. And there's also, again, that idea of it's not just the mushrooms, it's the whole ecosystem where they live. Yeah. So, in the process of going out to harvest them, are people responsibly tending to where the mushrooms live? There's certain ones like medicinally, like chaga, that are really, really kind of have blown up in popularity, but not always harvested sustainably. So, one that, maybe it's better for someone if, it has some very specific uses. And so, it could be used in certain cases, but maybe not in such a widespread manner, being really aware of where they're getting mushrooms from.
Yeah, you do your due diligence of seeing how anything is sourced. Because, for example, chaga, I like to use chaga for anti-inflammatory reasons, but I'm not using it daily. I use it specific for certain conditions. But at the same time, Emily informed me, that's something not typically sustainably harvested. It's very damaging because they have to chop
interesting.
Down. And those trees are already damaged or compromised, and that's why that fungus can get in there. It's an expression of ill health of the tree too. But then it could further that injury. So yeah, it's as anything gets popular, it gets too popular, right? I mean, it's like more is more. That's what we're in, right?
Yep.
So it's understanding like, let's look at this more holistically and see whether we really need all this. But
going back to the discovery and not so much the extraction.
Exactly. It's developing that relationship, and there's still so much that we can benefit, from just spending the time with them and getting to know them. And, then it doesn't have to be harvesting and ingesting.
Yeah. And mushrooms are their relationship with trees and water and humidity, like all those things are things that bring, I think, comfort and health unto itself, just being amongst all these things. So like, I see that as medicine. Like I always feel better when we come back from a hike.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There's rarely been a case unless I'm covered in poison oak, which is the price I have to pay looking for mushrooms. But,
No, and it's an incredible practice. And I think it's a wonderful way for people to get outside, give them another reason to get outside. They can learn, be curious. There's discovery. So it's such a fun, and it's such again, pocket size. So it's such a great book to sort of take with you. And then, if you don't know what something is, take a photo. And when you get back, you can do your research. I guess you can search on the trail, but we don't want to encourage that. We want to go home and do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then where can we follow you? And
I'm primarily on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, Instagram and Threads. But Emily says that I need to promote my website, gregoryhan.com.
Okay, there you go. You just did it. Good job.
I will say gregoryhan.com.
Okay, I love that.
We'll put that in the show notes. And Emily, you also have a website?
And yes, and mine is emilyhan.com.
Okay, good.
That's a good way to find me as well as Instagram too.
Good. Well, thank you so much, you guys, for taking the time and sharing about the book and your passion. And I'm super excited for people to get outside and look for those mushrooms. Yeah.
Mushroom hunt.
Yeah. Come on and visit us and we'll go
good.
mushroom
when we come out to LA, we'll do a hike together in the foothills.
That would be wonderful.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you both again. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so right off the bat, the first thing I want to point out is the sense of joy that Emily and Gregory both have when they talk about mushroom hunting. It's so palpable and so contagious.
Yes. And I mean, we talked about getting outside for a walk, but I do think there's something exciting about the idea of getting outside because you're searching for something, right?
Yes. And I love that analogy you drew with bird watching, especially thinking of mushroom hunting as a non-extractive practice.
Right. And I'm a total novice with zero knowledge about mushrooms, except maybe being able to cook a few, but I can still get out there and try to find them, right? I don't need to harvest them, but I can find them. And that's really interesting.
Such a good point. And it's such a great example of a mindfulness practice too. Sometimes we always need to get out of our own heads and explore the world around us.
And it's just endlessly fascinating, the whole mycelium network and how mushrooms are really just the fruit of this vast interconnected world, again, beneath our feet. I mean, there's so much we have left to discover and learn about. It's pretty exciting.
Yes. And so many more mushrooms left to discover as well. I was fascinated by this whole conversation. And again, like their excitement was really palpable about what they love to do.
Yeah. It's a really accessible book. Really cute. It's small, giftable, perfect for your pocket when you're hunting. Definitely check it out. And it's one of our recommendations.
And don't forget to follow Gregory and Emily on social media. It's all linked in our show notes.
All right. Talk soon, Jen.
Bye, Monica.
Thanks so much for listening. If you've enjoyed the podcast, we would love for you to follow us on our favorite listening app. Give us a 5-star rating and please leave us a review.
Listens, follows, and reviews really go such a long way and help us share these amazing interviews and solutions for a wider network.
Absolutely. And we'll be back with another great guest in a few weeks.